Hey Megalithomaniacs, how you all doing? We're here with Praveen Mohan, who's come all the way from India to share his remarkable research on the temples, the megaliths and the ancient mysteries of that continent. I met up with Praveen in India for a short while I was there for a few weeks in February. And also we met up at Stonehenge and I showed him around Stonehenge and Avebury and other places. But today I'm going to ask him about some of his research and some of the remarkable sites that exist in India, which not many people know about. So we're going to get into it now. We're going to sort of blast through a few sites, a few ideas. I do recommend you check out his vast YouTube channel. And you can just search for it, Praveen Mohan, you'll find everything there. And just let me know what you think of his videos, because some of the stuff he's discovered is absolutely mind-blowing. So Praveen, delighted to see you. Thanks for joining Megalithomania and having this interview at last. We've got together and actually sat down and done this. So so can you just tell us a bit about, where you're based in India and kind of what drew you in to all these kind of temples and trying to understand their mysteries?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here, and thank you, Megalithomaniacs, for watching my work. I was born in India. I grew up in temples, so I grew up watching all these statues and carvings and rituals and all that stuff in temples, which, was, I guess, early training, basically. So, and I was very curious about what was the meaning behind all these carvings. And they have some very interesting rituals, There were statues of various gods, and there were separate rituals that you had to perform in front of each statue. It's very interesting. For example, one of the statues we used to call as a deaf god. So this is called Chandigeswarar in India, and it's very interesting because he's called the deaf god in India, and when people went near the statue, right? So I don't know how much of your viewers know about Hinduism, but in a Hindu temple, in an ancient Hindu temple, you have hundreds of gods. It's very polytheistic. So you have hundreds of gods. One god is like the sun, the other god is a god of money, etc. And then there's one god that's called the deaf god. So when people went near that deaf god, whatever you do, it's not going to reach him. So you kind of had to clap your hand or like snap your fingers to get his attention. And we see this is common knowledge in India. So people do all sorts of, like in front of Ganesha or the elephant god, people kind of did squats in front of the elephant god. They would hold their ears like this, and they would do squats, literally, like you had to do it like 10 times before the elephant god. And this is very interesting, and it really catches your attention. Why are all these people coming to the temple? And you see some guys snapping their fingers in front of the statue, some guys doing the squats, some guys doing strange rituals. And I wanted to really decode the meaning behind all these carvings and statues and rituals.
That's fascinating, because I remember when I went there, I went to Lepakshi Temple, and I think it's called
Lepakshi Temple.
Lepakshi, yeah. And this is not too far from Bangalore. We saw the giant kind of bull statue, which was an incredible megalithic monument. But when I went there, it was so busy. There was hundreds of people there, and they were all there, and it felt like they were there for a sacred reason. And it was packed, and it was, I know some days that happens, but it makes me realize as well, following on from what you're saying, these temples are alive. Yes. They're still active, they're still being used. It's almost like it's never changed since they were built.
And this is why I say, especially to your viewers, come to India, right? Because I know we have great megalithic structures. We have the Egypt, we have Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe, we have the Stonehenge and all that stuff. But you see, the Egyptians are no longer worshipping the Ra, right? They're not worshipping the ancient Egyptian gods, right? They've all become Muslims. The people in Greece are no longer worshipping Thor and Hercules, right? They've all become superheroes. They've all become Christians. All Greeks and Europeans have become Christians. But India is the only place where we have 1 billion pagans still worshiping these gods. So we have the continuity. So we not only have the statues and the temples, but we also do the rituals and we also believe these gods. So you can, if you guys come here to India, you not only get to see the structures, but you also have an opportunity to understand the mindset of why they built it, what they're doing.
Yeah, one of the other things from Lapakshi Temple, which really blew my mind, it was your video that got me to go there, was not just the giant bull statue, which is a whole amazing story in its own right, but it's the giant footprint that's carved into the temple grounds itself. Now, you know, from a distance, it kind of looks like an actual footprint of a giant. It's like, what, 2 feet long? It's pretty big, but you can see it's been carved out. But I remember you saying, and you said you interviewed someone locally, that actually, originally, that was a footprint of an actual giant going back thousands of years to a different Yuga cycle. And this is actually part of the tradition of that area. Can we just talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I went to the Lapakshi Temple probably 2016 or 17, and I made a video about this on YouTube. It's still there. And I've actually put what the local tour guide says, and he'll say this is the footprint of an ancient human being, right? And then after that, because it kept fading, they had to carve, they had to retrace that. We don't know for sure if that's true or not. But see, Hinduism believes that humans 10,000 years ago were giants. They were kind of very tall. They were 10 foot, 15 foot tall humans. And we spoke to Randall Carson about this yesterday, and he was saying the same thing. He believes that, the giant mound builders of America and the Nephilim stories and how Hindus believe that ancient humans were much taller actually may be a part of history, right? Humans or some subspecies of humans could have been much taller, right? And this is probably true, and what they had was a real footprint there. And then it's, because of and this is the beauty of India, because if you had something there, we renovate that. We don't let that fade away. So if it's slowly fading away, if there's a carving, and if it's slowly fading away, we renovate that. We try to preserve that. And it's very interesting, because what's happening in Indonesia today is that if we go to Java Island, we have a lot of Hindu temples, amazing temples. And Indonesians are very nice people, they try to preserve the Hindu temples. I'm not blaming them. But 87% of Indonesians are Muslims. So it's like a Muslim majority country. And they're not allowed to carve figures. So they cannot recreate that. They're not allowed to carve figures. It's prohibited in Islam. So they kind of their hands are tied. So slowly these statues and these carvings are fading away. But in India, we preserve that, right? In India, they say, okay, so this footprint is fading away. So they carve that. But what happens is, in the last 20, 50 years, people also argue, oh, no, this is new. They just carved this. This is not real. They just carved this. But that's a possibility too, and we have to acknowledge that. Maybe somebody did carve this new, but we have evidence that 100 years ago, they had the same giant footprint, so they've been doing this. And we have giant footprints, not only in Lapakshi, we have at least a dozen giant footprints all over India and Sri Lanka.
Okay. That's pretty impressive. Also, all over India and Sri Lanka, you have dolmens these megalithic structures that are kind of found worldwide. I mean, this is something that a lot of people don't realize, that there's certain styles of megaliths that are found not just in Britain, not just in Europe, but dolmens are found in North America, they're found in South America, they're all over the world, they're Africa, India, Australia, anywhere you can think, you know, Korea. And I visited some, I think the Hiram Benkel dolmens, not far from Hampi.
Yep.
And they were really interesting because I know you've been there, you've been to other ones in South India as well, but there's some examples of like, they're really thinly cut, they're like slices of granite.
Yes.
They make the dolmens with. And up on the hill, there's a half-sliced boulder, like it's been lasered. I mean, what do you make of these? I mean, because these are supposed to be, what, 5,000 years old? Something like that?
At least, yes. So if we look at history, right, today's history starts from yesterday, because today it's just news, right? Yesterday, the history starts and goes back to like 3,200 years. But dolmens, cairns, stone circles, they're prehistoric monuments, right? Because we don't have any written record of why they were created. And you are absolutely right. Dolmens and cairns are the only structures which are universal, right? Because in the UK you'll have other structures like this, you know, like the Stonehenge. In Egypt you'll have pyramids. And you're absolutely right? Because dolmens, all these prehistoric structures, right? The stick figures in cave paintings, the dolmens, everything prehistoric is pretty much universal, right? There's no difference. I really love this part because after the historic period, we can say, okay, so this belongs to Hinduism or Southeast Asia and India. And we can look at pyramids of Egypt and say, okay, so these kind of structures belong here. But when we go back in time beyond the historic period, the dolmens are everywhere, right? They're everywhere. And yeah, I did go to the Hira Binnacle site probably 8 years ago, I think. A very interesting site, very interesting dolmens, and you're absolutely right. They did something to the stones, and they look very thin, and it's way up the hill, and nobody goes there. They had bears at that time, were they?
There were apparently bears around, so yeah, we were looking out for them.
Yeah,
for
so
sure.
very interesting site.
Yeah, and I just love the fact that they kind of they look like they lasered the granite. I mean, you know, where we come to India, we're going to talk about this in a moment, about the technology there, but to see them on these dolmens as well, it looks like they're somehow precisely cutting dead flat, really hard crystalline granite. And that really impressed me. One of the other things I noticed was many of them have holes, like a porthole in the entrance to the dolmen itself. And some of them are very tall. They're like houses, and they're supposed to be like, aren't they supposed to be the houses of the dwarfs? That's what the tradition states, even though some of them are giant size. So you have this dwarf tradition and giants also in India, which I think is really, really interesting. So you just find all these different elements you find in other countries existent in India as well. Why not just on a side note, before we start talking about some of the technology, the high technology we see in India. When I was there, I visited, I went further north, and I went to some cart ruts, which are called Krishna's chariot tracks. That was way up north. It was before you went to Bodh Gaya. It was kind of that general area around there. And I couldn't believe it. These cart ruts, one set of cart ruts, moving at an angle across this carved out of basalt though, not limestone. But again, these are universal. These are in Malta, these are in the Azores, even in Texas. They're all over the world. And so I'm just blown away to find little anomalies like that, you know, but here they're applied to the ancient kind of Vedic texts. And they talk about this is the area where Krishna went through in his chariot, and it was so hot it burnt them, and it has a whole story associated with it. You don't really get that in other cultures because the traditions have been lost. Yes. So I find that fascinating. I mean, what do you make of, you know, anomalies like that in India?
Yeah, because there's not a single site, I don't think, that's not related to the gods. Because Krishna's butterball is like a huge round rock. It's huge. This is in Mahabalipuram. This is called Krishna's Butterball. It's related to Krishna.
Yeah.
And the bridge between Sri Lanka and India, this is called Rama's Bridge or Ram Setu. They just attributed that to Lord Rama. This is very common in India. And same thing with your cart ruts, just associated with Lord Krishna.
Yeah,
extremely common. We've seen Shiva's musical instrument. We've seen, Vishnu's helicopter type of stuff. Now, we don't know how these names came about. I mean, we can also assume that, people were just naming them after gods. But possibly there was some connection between the gods and these things. For example, the Rama's bridge. In the ancient text of Ramayana, they say that Rama literally builds a bridge between India and Sri Lanka. It's detailed in great, it's greatly detailed there. Okay. How long it is and how they built it and all that stuff. So there may be some truth to it,
Yeah.
And eventually we may find out.
I just find it fascinating. I mean, the richness of India, it really blew me away because spending 3 weeks there, not long enough clearly, but the first time I've been there, and I did a huge amount of research over the years and the build up to visiting there, and it just was I landed there and it was like going into a dream state. The whole time I was there, I felt really comfortable, like I was supposed to be here, like I kind of felt I knew what I was doing there. It was a very strange kind of feeling about the place. I felt right at home. I felt really easy. Meeting you, I met up with Subhashish Das, some friends in Bangalore, and it just all worked out. I think there's something kind of magical about where traditions are maintained. And there's what John Michel, who, the Megalithomaniac, original Megalithomaniac, he had this whole thing about the enchantment of the landscape in Britain. This is where all the stone circles were geometric, placed all around the country, creating this harmony, and it would affect your consciousness. Yeah. And you go to India and it feels like that is happening.
Yes.
And it's still alive. It's never broken. It's always been there. And then you, with your research into the extreme precision and the geometry and the mathematics within these sites, and also, I believe the placement of them across the country, it's the same principles. And so, do you feel like when you visit other places, it's quite different feeling, compared to when you've got this living tradition in India?
Yeah, we definitely, every place has a vibe to it, whether we like to believe that or not.
Yeah.
That's just a fact. Every person comes with a vibe. There's no doubt about this. And when we're younger, we spend all our, we try our best, trying not to accept that. We say, oh no, well, there's no energy to a site. There's no energy to a person. But we can, as we become older, we definitely understand that, a place or a thing or even an animal, it's a fact that some dogs are, very friendly, and some dogs can become very irritable. There are some dogs even, so there are vibes to every site. And it's very interesting because when you start to receive that vibe, you can understand that the builders designed the structures with a certain vibe, okay? So in India, this is common knowledge in India. If you're a Hindu, for example, let's say, you're suffering from depression. You're always depressed. They would ask you to go to a certain temple for 48 days. Oh. Yeah. So if you had, for example, if you had stomachache, or if you had, if your arm was always paining, they would ask you to go to a different temple. If a couple did not, they could not, have a baby, they would tell them to go to a series of temples. And because in our tradition, they understand that the temples were built with a certain vibe, okay? So the temples were built with a purpose in mind. And we don't fully understand that, right? Because now we tend to think that, okay, so it's a temple, it's a place of worship. This will be your idea, right? So when you go to a church, you'll be like, you're not going there to, this is my assumption, but you're not going there to gain knowledge about, physics. You just go to a church to worship God. Nothing wrong with that, right? Or if you go to a mosque, you go there to communicate with God. There's nothing wrong with that. But in a Hindu temple, it becomes completely different, right? Because you don't need a lot of these dancing carvings in a place of worship. You don't need a sundial, right? A clock in a place of worship. You don't need all these carvings of animals giving birth in a place of worship. You don't need that. So the temples were built both as a library, like it's like a Wikipedia. You take a child there. The child can learn a lot of things. The child usually comes back and tells you, oh, do elephants give milk to their babies? Right? I don't know, do they?
I don't know.
Exactly, you don't know, but they do.
Yeah, okay.
But
okay.
a child who visits an ancient Hindu temple I've seen it with my own eyes. The child went up to the father and says, do baby elephants give milk to, do baby elephants drink milk from their mothers? Right? Because it's carved there. It's carved there. You don't even know, because we're adults, right? We probably don't get the chance to see that. But the child gets that knowledge. It's like watching Animal Planet.
Yeah. So it's almost like these are kind of knowledge buildings as well. These are like kind of almost like they're there to kind of teach. They're there to kind of give information. So this is incidentally very interesting because I believe that's the same case at Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe in southeast Turkey. These nearly 12,000-year-old sites, because the carvings there, they're all in a kind of circle. It's almost like there's a route, like a sort of circuit you do. And you pick up different information at different times of the year as you go around the different months. And I feel like it's a similar thing, perhaps, what you're saying. It's like a memory space. Mm-hmm. It's like the way that knowledge is passed on. You kind of use that as the kind of tool, like the blackboard with the chalk on it, and to then give the teaching. So yeah, I find that's really intriguing. Another connection I believe there is with Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe is something you've been researching a lot, is the Shiva lingams. Mm-hmm. Now these really fascinate me, and this is one of I went to many sites, some with you, to look at some and kind of work out what was going on here, because at Karahan Tepe, my friend Charles Koss, also JJ, thought of this as well. It looks like it's like almost like a lingam style kind of pit, the structure AB, or the pillar shrine, where it has these 10 upright pillars carved out of solid bedrock with a serpentine one and also a head coming out the side. Mm-hmm. And it's very much like a lot of us believe it's like a lingam, like a Shiva lingam. It's got the water in it, it's got the channels coming out of it, it's got the phallic symbolism, mm-hmm. and everything else, possibly Shiva or a god coming over, overseeing it. It's got serpents on his neck. Like, doesn't Shiva have serpents around his neck sometimes?
Yes, Shiva does have serpents around.
So it's a very similar idea. And so, and with earlier researchers, they've drawn connections between these two different great cultures as well. So can you give us a bit of background on the Shiva lingam and about why it's important and linked with these sites?
Okay, so the lingam is perhaps the most discussed type of statue in all of Hinduism. They're still discussing it. They're still going to discuss that 1,000 years from now. There's no doubt, right? Now, according to mainstream and traditional archaeology, the lingam is a phallic symbol. Okay, it's a symbol of masculine energy, if you want to put it that way. And they're also saying that the yoni, the base, is a symbol of feminine energy. Okay, in some places, for example, in some parts of Indonesia and in newer temples. When I say newer temples in India, that means 500 years old. Okay, that's new in India. We can see that some people have kind of adapted, like they've adopted that phallic symbolism onto the lingam. They've made it look like a human phallus. Okay, but in ancient times, in ancient Hinduism, you almost never see that. You don't look at a lingam and says, okay, it looks like a male body part. It's not intuitively understandable because, and I don't think that either, by the way. I don't think it's like a phallic symbol, by the way. I think it's a mysterious symbol, and it's also considered a source of energy, right? And of course, it gets very intertwined, right? Because when we say it's a source of energy, when we say it has the power to give life, people tend to go back to the phallic symbol. And this is very common amongst humans, It's very common amongst humans because this is funny because if you send an emoji of an eggplant or a brinjal to somebody, that's suggestive. Okay, because they're immediately thinking about the male body part, right? If somebody sends you another fruit, they may think it's like a female body part. That's how people talk today. And when Jeff Bezos launched his first rocket, do you remember that rocket? Like the internet went nuts because it looked like a male body part. And they were kind of like, they were pixelating that. The internet he made a great achievement. He was sending a private rocket, to space. And people were talking about how it looks similar to a phallus. Because this is how humans think, okay? So this is common. So my point is, I don't think the lingam actually means a phallic symbol. I don't think that's what it means. But it also means a source of energy. And it gets very much interesting in ancient Indian temples. It becomes very interesting because the main chamber in an ancient temple is called Garbhagriha. Okay, so where is the lingam and the yoni located? It's located usually in the main chamber, the sanctum sanctorum of an ancient temple. And what's that main chamber called? It's called the Garbhagriha. Now, what's the Garbhagriha? Like, it means the uterus or the womb chamber of a woman. So that's a traditional name that we know that name has been used for more than 2,000 years. So there's some connection there, but we also don't fully understand that. Now, what's really interesting to me is not only that we don't fully understand the lingam, but this lingam also exists everywhere, right? This symbol of just a cylinder, right? It just exists everywhere. It exists in Stonehenge, right? Well, what's that called? What do you guys call that lingam in Stonehenge?
Yeah, you get some of the blue stones, some of the spotted dolerite look like phallic lingam. That's what they look like. I mean, it's very, very profound. I mean, in fact, all the blue stones have that look about them originally when they were probably there.
Yeah.
And so people say that just megaliths.
Yeah. But there's one big one. There's one big, what's that stone? I forgot the name of it. There's one big lingam where the shadow falls.
Oh, yes. Okay. Now there's a couple there actually. There's one of the blue stones, which has got like a kind of ridge down one side of it, standing upright. Yep. You've got another massive fallen stone with all the scoop marks on it,
yes,
which looks like it's been softened and scooped. And it's got like a separate, almost like top part. This is what gives it this look,
yes,
of this sort of male phallus. It's kind of, so I mean, Terence Meaden has even suggested that Stonehenge is a series of lingams, and the shadows at certain times, the solstices, etc., would then penetrate the male shard into the female yoni, the kind of trilithon, the entrance between the trilithon. So there's all this play of fertility between the male and the female.
Yeah.
So I see that at Karahan Tepe as well, but it seems to be that could be a similar thing, reflected in the traditions of the lingam in India.
Mm-hmm. Do you, no, that's really interesting to me because the lingam is also found in Ireland or Scotland. There's one phallic symbol in Scotland or Ireland. I wanted to go there, but I had to get a separate visa.
It's the Hill of Tara. Yeah, I think it's the Stone of Destiny. And I think that's a lingam. That's like a lingam on top of the kind of main sacred, almost like almost like a palace area of the kings and queens of Tara, going way back to Bronze Age and Neolithic times. And then you start getting into all the traditions linked with that. It's pretty epic, just like it is in India. Yeah.
So what is your opinion here? Like, you think the once upon a time, this is my idea, that once upon a time, people worship the same gods.
Yeah, you know? No, it makes sense. I mean, I think, but the symbolism is something JJ focuses on. The symbolism is being found in so many different places. And I think just to find something like the Pillar Shrine or Structure AB at Karahan Tepe, and it seems to have the same symbolism, not exactly the same design, but the same symbolism. And I find that fascinating because, you know, to find that in these different areas, especially with the connection that B.G. Siddharth made between the head from Navali Churi, an 8,300 BC site in Turkey, with the serpent going down the back like a Vedic priest ponytail. And he believed the Rig Veda, the astronomy in that was based upon stuff from Turkey. It was based upon the same era as Göbekli Tepe sky watches and things like that. So yeah, I think there's something going on. I think there's a kind of natural religious kind of drive people have, and it's always related to fertility, whether it be male symbolism or the female symbolism. We have lots of these goddess cults and cultures all around the world. There's little goddess statues we find in Malta, and the Paleolithic ones as well. So I think there's a drive in less advanced societies, especially for this kind of thing, because you're relying on fertility in the land, in your animals, in your crops for survival, as well as yourselves. So yeah, I think there's something to be said. So I think this lingam is like a long process of kind of development that ended up in certain places into certain forms. And yeah, it fascinates me. Yeah, there's something about it, which, you know, because seeing these lingams myself when I went to India and I was with you to see some of them, they blew my mind, because there again, this is a living tradition. There was stuff, paint placed all over them, and flowers and oils, and fires were still going, charcoals, and you just realise this is amazing, because, like we said earlier, these traditions are alive there. So, so I think, you know, the fact that it's still revered is really interesting.
Yes, it appears to be, to some, it appears to be exotic. Obviously, people think, oh, if you're an atheist, just like, oh, it's a lot of superstition, appears to be exotic. Sometimes people get frustrated because sometimes it gets really busy in temples. You'll have like thousands of people just swarming the place, right? But what we also understand, and it takes time to embrace it, what we do understand is that people start to become very peaceful and happy when they visit these ancient temples. And that's a fact, right? So you can go there, and this is what's happening now, because we're having like a renaissance in India, right? You could be filled with, you know, your work pressure. You could be depressed. You could be unhappy with your life. You could have personal problems. But if you go to an ancient temple, or if you go to a series of ancient temples, you're doing pilgrimage, basically. And the people who are starting to do pilgrimage come back as different persons. You know, it completely changes their lives. For some reason, it has a therapeutic effect on humans.
I agree, yeah, and same can be said, I believe, for the stone circles of Britain. I mean, there's a huge amount of research on the acoustics, the geometry, the placement. It's all like to enhance consciousness, enhance the soul. It's like the John Michel idea of the enchantment of the landscape, the enchantment of the human and the landscape combined. I think that's absolutely fascinating. I think another aspect of that, which I want to talk about, is the precision geometry and the stonework. The absolute, you do a lot about ancient technology in India. And I think that's part of it. I think it's part of all the same thing. When it comes down to precision, polished kind of stones and designs with specific shapes and everything like this. But what do you make of how they could have created such precision? I mean, I've seen like, Kailasa Temple. I went to Barabar Caves, and that blew me away. I mean, the walls are so smooth, they're like mirrors. It was really, really strange, really powerful acoustics. But this is all over India, this kind of technology. And back then, 1,000, 2,000 years ago, it wasn't supposed to be anything that could create that kind of precision.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on that in a general sense? And if there's a couple of sites we can discuss, that'd be fascinating.
I've obviously documented a lot of sites. We've documented at least a few hundred temples, I would say. Yeah. Definitely more than 100 temples. We do see extraordinary precision, right? And we're not only talking about astronomical precision. For example, there is a place called the Modara Sun Temple in Gujarat. The alignment is just perfect. Okay, so the sun, so this is a fun part, and some of your viewers may really like this. On a particular day, I don't remember if it's the solstice or the equinox, but on one of those days, if you go to that temple, your shadow will not fall on the ground. Oh. Yes. Now, it sounds like absolute superstition or pseudoscience, but you can literally go there on either the solstice or the equinox. I think it's the solstice, or it could be the equinox. But if you go to Modara Sun Temple, and if you stand there on that day around noontime, your shadow will not fall on the ground. And of course, it's mind-boggling, right? Because it's dedicated to the sun. And to ancient people, they're going to go there on that day because it's a solar event, right? People worship those days, and then when they go to the temple, their shadow will not fall. What ancient builders did was they built it on the Tropic of Cancer. Gotcha. So they built it exactly. They look at. In fact, it's so precisely done. There is a tiny little notch carved. And that's where the Surya is placed. That's where the Surya, the sun god, is placed exactly on the Tropic of Cancer. Okay, so they knew what they were doing. So we're talking about astronomical work there. But you were asking me more about the stonework, right?
Yes, as well as there's so many anomalies, but yes, but the precision stonework. I mean, we've seen like the work of people like Christopher Dunn, Ben Van Kerkwijk, looking at the Egyptian high technology. We've seen it in Peru potentially, elements of it coming out of Göbekli Tepe now, but clearly one of the most amazing places for this is India.
Yes,
by far.
So we can see some amazing stonework in ancient temples, okay? So we can tell that the ancient builders were putting details, were deliberately doing this to kind of create a lasting impression on mankind. They knew that people would come after 1,000 years, 2,000 years, and they would marvel at them. Right, so they made a change. There is literally in multiple temples. This is happening in Hampi. This is in many temples in Tamil Nadu. You will see a chain hanging from the ceiling, but this chain is made of stone. So they made these stone chains. People still don't believe that. An average visitor who walks in refuses to believe that all these links, it looks very empty and it even kind of moves, when there's a strong breeze, it moves. And then they refuse to believe that it's not made of metal. It's carved out of stone, okay? So we can see that things like these stone chains in ancient temples, and they knew that they would last for a long time. Imagine making a chain out of solid granite. Okay, this is really mind-boggling.
It's like one piece of granite you're sort of talking about.
Yes.
So it's not like they're putting it together in different pieces. It's like one piece.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Now think about it, right? So because you work with megaliths, right? You think about stones all the time, right? So you work with megaliths, right? So you think about stones all the time. So there's a ceiling like this, and there's a stone chain hanging from that, right? Correct?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then the chain has links. That's what we're talking about. So you're saying that the chain is not made of different stones. It's made of one stone, and they kind of carved all the insides out, right, to make it look like the chain. That's what you're saying, and it's hanging from big block there. But how is it connected to the big block on top?
Yeah.
How is it?
Yeah, that's pretty confusing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because now we're not only talking about the chain, we're not only talking about this block here, we're talking about this block, because you can't take two stone blocks and then put them together. We can do that with metal because we can open it up and then put it back in, right? So we're not only talking about the vertical stone chain, we're also talking about the horizontal piece. And sometimes the horizontal piece is like 20 feet long and 10 feet wide. It's like the one big block of ceiling. So how did ancient builders do that?
So we have these bizarre kind of stone chains. I've seen many beautiful carvings throughout India. You've talked a lot. We'll put some links into some of the videos about the high technology, because there's so many examples. But I went to Kailasa Temple, and that really blew my mind. That's further up north. It's an amazing site. Kailasa Temple is one of these multiple kind of cave sites. That's Ellora, isn't it? Ellora Caves, yeah. And that really blew my mind, because I saw your video on it, of course, and it's carved out of one giant chunk of granite or basalt. It's incredible. And so this, I don't think people realize. I didn't realize how big it was when I went there. I spent virtually the whole day there, because it just blew my mind. These 27 other temples I didn't get a chance to look at really, but that one. And it's much bigger than you think. There's obelisks there. There's elephants. There's carvings. Where did all the stone go? You estimated there was 400,000 tons of stone vanished from that. And where did it go? How did it disappear? Because I know, I don't want to give too much away, but you mentioned in this video they had some kind of ancient technology that's recorded in the old texts. So tell us about this amazing site.
Yeah, one of the very first things that I researched is the Kailasa Temple. I think this was in 2014 on YouTube. This is 10 years ago. And I realized that it became viral at that time. That was the very first video that became viral at that time. Because I did kind of a thorough research. I made a bunch of videos about the Kailasa Temple. At that time, Kailasa Temple was already famous, but it hadn't gotten the worldwide fame that it now has. But it deserves more fame, in my opinion. We already have Hillary Clinton coming and looking at the Kailasa Temple. Yeah, we got the Kailasa Temple everywhere now, right? People doing pilgrimage to Kailasa Temple. This is amazing, right? Not only staunch Hindus doing pilgrimage to Kailasa Temple, we also have people like ancient aliens people, the Megalithomania people. All these people are coming to Kailasa Temple to study the Kailasa Temple, right? Because it truly deserves that attention. And I'm saying it deserves more attention, right? In 10 years, it should get more people, because it's a world wonder, right? Yeah. That's what it is.
Yeah, it should be classed as one of the kind of wonders of the world.
Yes.
After seeing that up close, I was just, whoa, this is something special.
Yes. Because the way that the temple is carved is unique, okay? Because in Ellora Caves, we have about 32 different caves. Some are Buddhist caves, some are Hindu caves, some are Jain caves. And usually, if you're going to start building a cave temple, you and I, we start a project, we say, okay, let's get this giant rock and now start to make a temple out of it. You would start from the ground level. You go like this. This is called cut-in technology. Okay, so that's how most of the cave temples are built. But Kailasa Temple started from the top. of the mountain. That's what makes it so unique. It started from the top because there's no way you can start like this. So they started from the top and they did a cut-out technology. And it's very hard to believe that they can do that. So why? Because the Kailasa temple is not a simple cave temple. It has a lot of different things inside it. It has multiple chambers. It has multiple levels. It has floors. It has carvings. It has a lingam. When people go to Kailasa temple, when they go to a main chamber, they're worshipping a lingam. But that lingam is not put there.
Yeah.
The rocks around the lingam were carved out, right? So the lingam was already there. So all these spaces that people walk around looking at the carvings, that was filled with rocks once upon a time. That was solid mountain that you're walking on now. It's actually unbelievable how they did that, right? And then understand this, till today, right? They're saying, the Kailasa temple, they theorize it's 1,200 years old, probably much, much older, right? But let's say it's only 1,000 years old, let's say it's only 1,300 years old, whatever. Till date, nothing has been added to the temple. And you can see it's a finished temple. People try to destroy it like the pyramids. Still there, right? Because how do you destroy a mountain? You have to nuke it. Okay? Now, there are bridges. Okay? There's like one chamber, like there is like a second level chamber here, right? Like second floor here, there's like a balcony here, and between those two floors there's a bridge, right? There's like a walkway, and you can walk through that. And you had to completely understand everything, and you have to plan everything, put it on paper, completely mastermind that before you start carving anything, before you start scooping out just a little bit of rock. You have to plan everything out. And when you go to Kailasa temple, you realize how complex it is, man. I'll give you some styrofoam, right? I'll give you just a little block of styrofoam, and I'll dare you to carve something that looks even close to a Kailasa temple. So we're looking at like some insane design, planning, execution, with no mistake. Let's say they screwed up just one part, right? Let's say they damaged the bridge, right? Or let's say they built the structure, they scooped it out, and then they said, oh, we need a bridge between them. Yeah. They can't do it. You know what I'm saying? So we're looking at like a masterpiece. And this is why, it should be declared as a world wonder. Just because it's in India, it doesn't get that much attention. That's a fact. Okay, if it were in the UK, for example, or if it were in the US, in the US, no offense, we look at mounds as just a pile of dirt sometimes, right? And they're well protected. You get signboards on it. People respect that. People come from various states just to look at the mounds, right? But simply because the Kailasa temple is in India, it doesn't get that much attention, but it deserves the whole world should come and look at the Kailasa temple at least once.
I agree. But what happened to the 400,000 tons of stone that got removed? That's one of the big mysteries.
Yes. We don't know exactly what happened, and I say that you could literally build a pyramid with that excavated rocks, right? All the rocks that got scooped out, you can build a pyramid. You can build the Giza pyramid with the excavated rocks, and it's gone. It's not there, right? So we don't know, and of course, we may never find out. We may find out it's there somewhere, but if you look at ancient texts, it talks about a lot of different tools and weapons and technology that we don't understand. For example, there's one called Bhaumastra. They talk about Bhaumastra, not Brahmastra. Brahmastra is like a nuclear weapon, but they talk about Bhaumastra, in which you can put a tool into the earth, and it literally evaporates the rock. It just converts the rock. It just vaporizes the rock.
This is like recorded in some kind of ancient text
Yes.
in India?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, it literally talks about how the weapon or the tool, it literally talks about how the tool will go into the ground and find a rock and just vaporizes it. The Baumastra, you know how they were using the Baumastra? They used to kind of use like a metal detector, right? And they would try to find gold, and they would evaporate the rock, and they would go to the gold. Yeah, it talks about technology like that. So we don't know if this type of technology existed at that time.
That's fascinating. I mean, that reminds me of some of the Irish stories that we get from ancient Ireland, where they talk about having these high-level weapons and tools that could do such things. You know, like they could create massive destruction, but also be really useful for like constructing sites. So I find that fascinating that we have these kind of such ancient stories, almost like of a whole different world that's been completely forgotten. So it's amazing to hear all this, Praveen. It's a delight to talk to you. It was brilliant to spend some time with you in India as well, and hopefully I'll be coming back. We had you over in England briefly as well, Stonehenge and Avebury recently, so that was quite epic in its own right. And we hope you're going to come to England again, and we're going to be talking about you coming over and actually coming on a small tour with us, which would be amazing. So I want to thank you for joining me. Thank you for all the work you do. It's really serious amount of research. And everyone who's listening here, please check out Praveen's YouTube channel, his website and everything else. His videos are exceptional. His research is really a kind of high-level intellectual level. He gets invited to universities in India to share his research. That's the kind of level Praveen's at now. So it's been a brilliant chat. Thank you, Praveen, so much for joining us at Megalithomania.
Thank you, Hugh. I really appreciate, you having me, and we had this discussion. It's really good. I do look forward to coming to the UK. I know you have this Megalithomania event, and I also know that you do the tours. So you've invited me, but I hope we can do one together. It'll be fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. Look forward to that.
Yeah, thank you.